Pierre.
Hey, Pierre.
Hey, what's up? How you doing?
Good. Welcome, welcome.
Hi.
I'm very
Hi.
excited.
Nice meeting
How
you
are you?
guys. Doing well, doing well. So Joey, and how do I pronounce your name? Ors?
My name is Urs. Urs. It's a
Urs.
Hungarian
Urs.
name. Yeah.
All right, so
Yeah.
yeah, let's get started. Pierre is a mind-body practitioner, which means he specializes in nervous system regulation. He helps people restore balance in their body. He currently lives in Cairo, Egypt. He facilitates retreats for men to help heal, helping them find their masculinity and allowing them to be vulnerable and much more. He got involved in men's healing through his own personal journey. Welcome.
Thank you for
Welcome,
having
Pierre.
me.
Yes,
Thanks for
yes. And
joining us.
we're very excited. We're two men with a podcast, and we just feel like more men should be like us three, and more
Yep,
vulnerable.
that sounds good. That sounds good. Let's dive in.
Yeah, all right, cool. So, can you give us a background breakdown about your healing abilities? I see on your bio it says you have somatic healing, which I do, nervous system optimization, and deepening healing spaces. We'd love to hear more about that.
Well, I mean, there's two things here. Um, because healing abilities is interesting as an expression. I don't consider myself a healer. I think it is everybody has the innate ability to heal, but what I do is really creating spaces for people to connect to that ability to heal, if that makes sense. So there's many modalities out there, right? Somatic and different type of breath work and psychodynamic and cognitive behavioral therapy and blah, blah, blah. There's a million ways to heal. I think in the words of one of my teachers, there's as many ways to heal as there are human beings. Um, but I think it's important for us to understand that I think when it comes to healing, it's very much about creating a space that feels safe enough for people to feel what they need to feel. And what I've witnessed in the last 15 years of practicing and in the last 20 years of being in spaces with people dealing with challenging life situations, whether it's HIV, AIDS, cancer, trauma, torture, accident, abuse, and so on and so forth. What I've noticed is that when people feel safe enough, then they start to process, and there's that kind of like that innate wisdom to move back to homeostasis, to a place of balance. And not to say that it doesn't work, it doesn't take work, or it doesn't take time, but I think we can really use that. I mean, we need to remember, and I try to remind myself and remind my my clients and the people I'm working with, that what we're going to do is just open a space, and your body's wisdom will do the rest if we do it well. Is this making sense? Does that answer your question?
Find a safe place in your body to explore yourself.
That's one way. That's one way to do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's the mental, physical, emotional, social. I mean, if you talk about one-on-one, yeah, or if you talk about self, yes, I think the mind can be a pretty complicated and tricky, and many people, including myself, get lost in my mind sometimes.
Yeah.
The body is not necessarily more simple, but I think it is, when it comes to healing, um, a more honest way to approach feelings and sensations. There's less filters. It's more direct as far as I can see it. You mentioned you were doing some somatic work, so you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Um, so 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 yeah, if it comes to self, it is about finding islands of safety, finding a place within my body, within myself, that helps me ground, resource, feel more stable. If I'm working with somebody, it is about finding that space, that connection with that person, where there's safety, trust. Um, and if I'm working in a group, because I think group work is also fantastic, a group, men's work, for example, men's retreats, I
Yeah.
trust we'll go there at some point,
Yeah.
can be a very, very powerful place to heal, providing, again, that you trust in your facilitators, your guides, and life, God, yourself, whatever you need to trust in.
So when you do the retreat, like, you could tell me like how long is the retreat, like a day, full day, and then also how do you personalize for each male, like what they need? Do you find it right away that you know exactly where their safe space is to tap into, or is that a little bit of a struggle? And then like how do they come out at the end? Like, do they feel like less weight on their shoulders?
I mean, the duration is the retreats we do is usually a minimum of a couple of days, a minimum of 2 days as kind of a, checking things out. And when I say we, I'm referring to an organization I'm working with that's called the Sacred Sons,
Oh, okay.
which is right now kind of, it is a global movement of men awakening and doing the work, if I may say. And so a couple of days is the minimum, and we just had a big convergence of 4 days.
I saw that.
And we have some, longer programs or longer gatherings of 4 or 5 days, and then we have 3-month program, and it really depends on how deep do you want to go, because breaking news, it's not it's a lifelong journey. You know what I mean? This is not something you come and you deal with it and that's it. It's been 47 minutes and I'm done.
That wall that we build up from childhood, that wall is like solid, so.
It is. And frankly speaking, behind every wall is just like the Russian dolls, it's like, oh, again, and there's one more and there's one more,
Yeah.
Like many years ago, one of my mentor was one of my teachers was actually telling me, how the purpose of the work we do is to remove layers. And I failed to understand that at a few years ago, and I'm not sure I'm not understanding right still, but I see how really as we remove layers, we're coming closer and closer to ourselves. The more I remove layers, the more I find myself authentic, honest, less triggered, less neurotic, a little bit of a better father, a better husband. It's moving more towards something that I aspire to. So how many days, how long does it take? It takes a lifetime of, which I think is the most exciting journey, that one can be on. And how do the men feel afterwards? Oftentimes it feels like, okay, I think there's more of a sense of being connected, capable. Yes, I would say maybe less weight. Although sometimes it's also an awareness of the weight that we've been carrying. And what I mean by that is that healing process is not necessarily, let me dive in and from this point forward, I'm going to feel better and better and better. Sometimes it's let me dive in and reconnect to some of the feelings and experiences and emotions that I've been repressing, probably, subconsciously for years or decades. And part of that healing journey is about reconnecting to that. I speak for myself, like, I had a lot of anger. I used to say, I don't get angry. And that was really, a bunch of bullshit, if you pardon my French here. Of course, I used to get angry, but I wouldn't explode. But that anger would seep through a lot of my relationships. And so for me, the healing journey, part of that healing journey was also about finding a space that felt safe enough for me to get in touch with that anger. That was scary to me. You talk about that wall. That wall was thick because anger hurt me, as a kid. So I was like, I should never be angry like that, right? Which is an understandable defense mechanism, but you can engage fully in a relationship. I've been with my wife for 20 years. Of course we argue. Of course she needs to get angry. I need to get angry. We need to find each other in a space where we can be fully honest with each other so we can come to a place of resolution. Otherwise, I'm just shoving it all down.
Yeah.
And then eventually, if I don't have a space for that anger, I bring it home. So yeah, that journey can be, ups and downs. But even when we feel what we need to feel, what I maybe the best answer to your question, how do they feel afterwards? I think it's more live, more live and more connected, and with a sense of like, okay, let me own my emotions, my experiences, my life, and grow up. Really, grow up to try to become a better husband, better partner, and better son, and so on and so forth.
So it's like if they go in a cave and they find a little piece of gold, and then all of a sudden they get motivated to like, wait, there's gold in here, and they want to dig some more because there could be more gold in the cave.
There can be more gold, and they also, and that's true. And what's also true is that they can dig and be like, oh, that shit hurts.
Yeah.
Let me address it now, because otherwise otherwise I'm just going to push it down, and I'm going to numb myself with weed, with porn, with drugs, with sex, with and not actually feel what I need to feel to come back to a place where I can be healthier, where I can be more live. So there can be nuggets of gold, there can be nuggets of wisdom, and sometimes there's nuggets of pain, nuggets of pain and grief and sadness that are equally valuable in that journey.
Nice.
Can you tell us about your own personal journey about this, and what led you to start helping men, basically? It was related to that anger which you mentioned before, or it was different?
Well, I mean, 20 years ago, I started to work for the United Nations Development Program. I was working with people living with HIV and AIDS. And long story short is that I realized that the most effective programs, or let me rephrase that, the more transformational experiences that we would have with people were not the ones that were technical or informational. It was about that space where people had a chance to really be themselves, be more honest, be more authentic, be more vulnerable in a safe and manageable way. Because then I could see that shift. And I was like, that's interesting. And I also at that time heard people telling me that some of their challenges, in this particular example, somebody living with HIV told me, she was like, well, this is the best thing that ever happened to me. And I was like, what? Like I didn't get it. What I did not understand at that time, that she was telling me that was the wake-up call. That was the wake-up call for me to take care of myself, to reconsider my priorities, to reconsider my life. And so all these experiences led me to kind of start studying different mind-body modalities with hypnotherapy and breathing and so on and so forth. And I really came into men's work, if that's specifically your question, a few years ago when my wife and I were going through a tough time. And at some point she was like, look, this is like, I don't know what's going on, but if we keep going like this, I think we should get a divorce.
Wow.
And and have 2 kids. And I was like, fuck, how? No, again, pardon my French, I don't know what's the cursing policy on your podcast.
No, it's okay, you can do whatever you like.
I'm French, brother, so
it needs, sometimes you need to say those words,
but that was how real it got for me. I was like, oh wow, this is, wait, I may lose that because of unresolved pain, because of unhealthy patterns that were clearly getting in the way. Now, was it all my quote unquote fault and responsibility? No, it was, my wife was also had her part to play, but she was doing the work. She was, or she was doing the work. And at that time, there was a lot of changes, and she loved me enough and loved herself enough to say, I'm not going to take that shit anymore. So either you get it together and you heal and you grow, or we're done here. And that's what led me on that journey, because I was like, okay. I've been doing healing work. I've been practicing. I've been a practitioner for a while, but there was a piece missing. And frankly, it was kind of more of a coincidence where I was like, I need a space, any space right now. I'm gonna, and it's my wife who actually was like, hey, check out these guys. They have a retreat coming up. Why don't you go? And I was like, yeah, just, I don't need to check them out. I'm just signing up because I need a space to do the work anyway.
Yeah.
And the rest is history. I realized in that retreat, I mean, it opened spaces for me to do the work at a level of depth that were not available to me before. And I've been doing this work for a long time. I started to study these practices and in practice like 15 years ago. And yet there was a piece missing. And so for me to be in that safe and powerful container and seeing some brothers processing things again with their body, with their voice, with like, in a more embodied way, was truly life-changing. It was inspiring to me. And that's why, and as a practitioner, frankly, creating a space also where I could practice at a much deeper level than just one-on-one, at my office. So that's what led me to it. Like me wanting to save my marriage, me wanting to be present for my kids, to do everything I could do. And I'm saying that with a lot of respect, maybe for some of the guys listening and who actually got through a divorce. I just did a podcast with a colleague called Fathers Uniting, because the divorce rates are through the roof and the suicide rates are through the roof, and men are really, it's a tough time. And yes, it is a man's world and all that bullshit, but men are suffering too. And so for men to have a space where they're able to come and address that pain, address these unhealthy patterns that get in the way of them having a healthy relationship with their kids and with their wife or with their partner or boyfriend or whatever, I think is a really important thing to do. So that's why today I'm one of the leaders of the Sacred Sons, leading retreats around the world. It's with gratitude and honor, because it is a special space.
Can you give us Pierre, just like a little bit of insight of like some of the techniques you will use at the retreat to kind of get guys to do the shift in their mind of being this macho, I gotta, kind of like the old caveman mentality. I gotta kill the animal, bring it home. And like, what's some of the techniques you do at the retreat to kind of make that shift to say, you know what, it's okay to be the emotional one and to cry, you know?
That's why I feel like the power of the collective is really important when it comes to healing, because it's not about it's not about the techniques. I mean, yes, I'm trained in, trauma recovery and nervous system regulation, and to answer your question, I would say, that a lot of the work is somatic. So we start with the story, but very early on, so that we don't get lost in the story, so that we don't get stuck in that narrative. We start to explore the body and what needs to be expressed and what the body needs to do. But most importantly, to your question as to like, okay, how to help the men feel vulnerable, oftentimes it's just seeing other men having the courage to share things that they've never shared before.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been in retreats where the guys, like, I've heard that many times. They're like, I've never shared that before, but I was abused when I was a kid, or I'm addicted to porn, or and so on and so forth. And it's quite amazing, I think, and it's to have that courage, that is shared. We say, iron sharpens iron, man sharpens man, which is kind of the motto for this work. And that's what it is. It's like, look, you're not expecting to come and to do that work alone. Oftentimes, men will come and I know I witnessed, some processes where I was like, wow, this got real. Like, the guys really, went deep into his pain and into his anger. And that gave me permission to do the same. You know what I mean? So that whole lone wolf bullshit is really counterproductive. It's a disservice. The idea that I need to show up and I need to be strong all the time, and I need to know what to do all the time. No, you don't. Like this is not how it works. So for us to healing is the same. For us to be in a space where I see other men kind of, paving the way for me, just blazing that trail, that gives me permission then to say, okay, let me try that. And sometimes what I need to hear, like if a brother, like a few months ago, a couple of a month ago, actually, we had a beautiful process with, a brother who had lost a father. And in that process, we started to involve other men who also had lost their father. And then we started to involve men who had lost loved ones. And so you find yourself in the midst of a process here where 20-something men, 30-something men, 50, in Scotland, we were about 300 men.
Wow.
So you can imagine the energy, the power that's available to you. The frequency that's available to you. Yeah, it's like, okay, now it is a portal, So in that moment, it's amazing the energy and the space and the honesty and the vulnerability that's available. And then comes the guidance of facilitators who have to be trained and who have to be professional, and we need to know how to manage that activation so that it doesn't turn into a shit show of 30 guys just shutting down or losing their shit. That's not about it. It is about, okay, let's just stay in a place, identify the guys who are like, process what you need to process, but remember, you don't have to process everything right now. That's why I started that conversation with, like, it's an ongoing journey, bro. Come, process what you need, open that door, and join the club of men who realize, like, oh, I have a bit of baggage, that I need to deal with. And if I was to deal with that baggage, guess what? I'm probably going to be much happier. And guess what? My wife or my partner or my boyfriend or like the people in my life will also be much happier, because I'm not going to keep on bringing that bullshit, that I used to bring in the past.
Wow. So you said before you worked with men, you were working also with women. I saw that you had a meeting with the women and the men. So can you talk to me about how you work with women?
I work with everybody. This past few years, men's work has taken an increasingly important part of my life and my work, because it is a beautiful adventure.
Yeah.
That brotherhood is real. I'm grateful to have so many men around me who are walking that talk and who want to grow. And I'm all for hanging out, bro night, and and we're gonna talk about sport and we're gonna talk about politics and stuff. But eventually, that I'm not. I want to go deeper. I want to have greater and deeper connections with the men around me, and I want men, including people around my kids, who are gonna show up and they're gonna be accountable, and they're gonna hold me accountable. If I do something that's out of integrity, I want my friends to call me on that. You know what I mean? If I don't see it, I want to be able to have men around me who are going to be like, hey, like, you shouldn't have talked to your wife like that, or you shouldn't, talk to your kid like that. And then we can have a conversation, because we're here to support each other. So men's work is taking an important part of my life, but actually a lot of my work is, historically, I've worked primarily with women, like most of my clients, and I want to say most of the people doing the work of healing are women. You go to any circle, any healing circle, there's got to be 80 to 90% women, 10 to 20% men. That, like, stereotypical. You know what I mean?
Our Instagram page is all women.
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
75% women.
That sounds about right. So when it comes to women, I think they're God bless them. I think they're more courageous in a way. Maybe there's less stigma for them to do the work as well, and that's why I'm grateful to be part of, you know, a global movement. Like, look at all the men's circles and the men's retreats happening lately. Things are shifting and men are waking up because we letting go of that old idea that, you know, if I'm, you know, boys don't cry and all that bullshit that I grew up with, that was Joy grew up with, you know.
Yeah, we both urge the
It's
same
like,
way. Yeah.
you know, it's the same stuff. So I think it's and it is a disservice. But how to work with women in the same way that I work with men? And obviously there's differences, you know, because I'm a man, and when I work with women, and there are, I think, additional levels of awareness that need to be brought into this process, including I've worked with, you know, women who had suffered from sexual abuse. And for them to do the healing work with a man, you know, I think is a beautiful opportunity. It's important. And it also requires for me to be extra alert as to, you know, and obviously I wouldn't hold a person the same way, a woman in that process, the same way I would go for a man. I still ask for permission for a man, but there's, you know, there's less, it's less complex.
Especially if there's rape involved or sexual touching from their previous childhood, something like that, you know.
You know, I've been in spaces where I would actually shift. My chair was actually a little off, like, because facing each other was a little too triggering for my clients, and it's okay, like whatever you need. So I'm just gonna look this way as we do the work, so, you know, she wouldn't feel so, you know, I'm looking at her because, yeah, I'm looking at you, we're having a conversation, but I understand if it's a trigger, then let's start in a place that feels safer. You know, that's okay. That's for me. That's for me to do that. Yeah.
So the men, they come in, can you share like a common maybe backstory that they have that brings them into the retreats? Like, is there something that kind of comes up over and over? I mean, I guess probably divorce is on their doorstep, or, you know, is there something that's common that you see that finally pushes them to the brink? Because men, I don't know how you get them in the retreat, because, you know, like I said, I tried to help a few guys on Instagram and they just don't thanks, you know, so.
You know what gets them in the retreats? 80% of the time, their partner.
Yes.
Like, so most of the women listening right now are probably like, how can I get my partner to that retreat? Because most of them want their man to do the work.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't come across any woman who is like, no, my husband, my partner has zero issues and he doesn't need to do any emotional work. Like, every single woman I've met the past few years is always like, oh, thank God some guys are doing the work, because it's about time. So what brings them there most of the time? An invitation or an ultimatum of a partner. I think I'm representative of what happens. A partner who's like, I'm tired of that bullshit. It could be so much better. If only you were to give ourselves a chance and give yourself a chance to heal, right? And and sometimes it's pre-divorce, sometimes it's post-divorce.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's the loss of a loved one. Like, nobody engages in this kind of transformational process and growth without some kind of adversity.
Yeah.
You know, that's if I'm comfortable, why would I change? So oftentimes it's that discomfort or that knowledge that it's like this, but there's so much more right now. I think I also hear a lot of men being like, I can't really feel. Like, I've often clients coming to me and being like, please help me feel, because I feel like my emotional bandwidth is just really limited.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the men have not explored, and it could be from, you know, previous stress and trauma. And message to anybody listening here, you know, like, being traumatized is it's not a weakness, or it's just mean you've been through life. You know what I mean? And if you're alive right now, you're an adult, and it's 2023, end of 2023 at the time of this recording, you've been slapped through life. You've been slapped by life unavoidably. If wherever you were in the last 2 years on the planet, you went through some shit. So just that, and nobody waited for COVID, to go through some difficult times. But so understanding that it takes courage to say, okay, you know what? Let me address some issues that right now are not helpful. They actually get in the way of me being the best husband I can be, the best partner I can be, the best father I can be. For me, and I know for many men I've met, they did this work because they were going to be fathers, or they were young, or they were fathers, and they're wanting to have a different relationship than they had with their parents. They wanted to try to do better, and that's not a judgment on the parents. I'm a father of two. I'm making mistakes all the time.
Yeah.
But I'm also trying my best not to repeat like some mistakes that my parents did because they didn't know what they didn't know.
Yeah.
And it was a different time. You know what I mean? So I think also kudos to the men in general who do this work, and to the fathers who are like, I want to make sure that when that kids arrive, as this kid grows up, I can be the best father for him or for them. Because guess what? Like a kid is gonna challenge you like hell. Like there's nothing that's gonna challenge you more. Like I don't know if you guys have kids.
No.
Do you guys have kids? No.
Oh, no kid, no kid.
But it's like it's a lot. It's gonna trigger you. So you might as well be proactive and try to find again a space where you're not gonna pass on all your intergenerational trauma going back generations. I come from what I've learned along, a lineage of men who had kind of lost their father and got hurt by their father. And it was interesting because there was, for me, that father wound was very present in my life, and I'm healing that wound. And by healing that wound with my own father, I'm also shifting things with my own son and daughter. I'm a different father because as I'm working on my relationship with my father as much as I can without expecting him to change because he's who he is, I'm still able to kind of, shift a lot of things, and there's going to be ripple effects like decades from now because of this healing work. So for me and for a lot of men, it is also about, as for the kids, like I'm like, I want to try to mitigate the impact of, of life on my child and make them as resilient as I can.
Yeah. Yeah. If I can go back through my healing journey, which lasted from 2007 till, now, but the biggest thing for me was always putting myself down because I have to go to therapy, and what's wrong with me, we don't do that, probably subconsciously thinking that I'm a man and I'm getting help and crying in group therapy. And I'm like, damn, I would have saved myself so much heartache if I would have just removed that thought process out of my my mind.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking how the stigma associated to men seeking help, and I'm not even talking about therapy, just opening up, sometime to a friend. I think the superficiality of conversations, because again, sometimes people lack the bandwidth to go deeper. It's heartbreaking. I think everybody, like right now there's sometimes I ask in there was a podcast interview, but in person a few months ago with a live crowd, and I ask, out of all the women here, how many women have, somebody they talk to like regularly, your mother, like sibling, friend, like how many of you have more than one person? And most of the women have their hand raised. when I asked the same question for the men, who has somebody that they can talk to and really share and go deep, most of the men didn't.
Yeah.
Most of the men are isolated.
Why do you think that is?
Again, I think it's just some cultural. We've lost a culture, and I can't generalize, but I can speak at least in the West, in the US and in France, at least. You know, we used to go and we used to hunt and we used to, you know, we would go to war and we would do things, you know, that, or can be on one hand traumatic, but also give us a purpose.
Yeah.
I think today men go out, they go to the cubicle, they spend the day on the keyboard, they go back home and they repeat. And I think it's the worst thing that can ever happen, you know, to humanity, is that lack of purpose. I think I think that's one of the reasons that men have found themselves increasingly isolated, with the pressure of, again, on one hand, you shouldn't complain and providing, but at the same time, if you look at, you know, some of the, I mean, these past few years, and feminism I think is a beautiful thing. And at the same time, I think there's also some issues with it, to the sense of like, men have lost a sense of purpose, you know, and right now it's just, even it's interesting to me to see, for example, you know, married couples with separate bank accounts and everybody's doing the same. They all have to, everybody has to work. Everybody has to take care of the kids. It's like 50-50 on everything. And I think I don't think that's at least as far as I can see it, an effective way to do it. Like I love, for me, I feel blessed to be able to provide for my family, to protect my family. You know, like over 10 years ago, we were in Egypt during the Egyptian Revolution. Then there was a reminder here. It's like, oh yeah, who's going down, right, to protect, and who's staying up to take care of the kids? Well, obviously, I'm not going to send my wife in the streets to fight, you know, cops and stuff. And like, no, I'm going down there and I'm going to do everything I can to keep them safe. For me, it is my purpose is to provide for my family and to keep them safe. And my wife also has some roles and responsibilities, and it works well for us, because then we all have our purpose. You know, and you know what I mean? Like I think we've men have found themselves, they've lost their purpose. In many cases, they've become, I think, emasculated. They've lost that sense of masculinity because it was all about toxic masculinity. And I think toxic masculinity is unhealed masculinity. It's hurt masculinity. Masculinity, when it's healthy, is beautiful. It creates safety. It creates containment. Yeah. It creates magic. You know, it's the archetype of the king. It's the archetype of the lover. It's the archetype of the magician. You know, and so on. And it's the archetype of the warrior, just like the example of in the revolution. But if this is taken away, then what I am? There's no more purpose. There's no more mission in my life.
What do you think? What is the difference between healthy masculinity and unhealthy masculinity? What are the common differences?
It's you know, I get some backlash sometimes because I'm like, oh, you guys do men's healing weekends or men's empowerment activities where men have enough power. Men are controlling the world. And I'm like, that's I mean, first of all, that probably comes from a place of hurt. I'm sorry that you got hurt by men who were themselves probably hurt as well. Hurt people, as we say. And so when we talk about a powerful masculinity, we're not talking about a powerful masculinity over people, right? It's powerful masculinity with people. If I'm a quote unquote healthy man, embodied with my masculinity, aware of my strength. It means I don't shrink, right? It means I stop playing small, which sometimes can actually, endanger my family, my livelihoods. So I give myself permission to express here. I think there's nothing, and I'd love, I don't know if you get comments, but I think there's nothing sexier also to women and men who love men, than a masculine man, a man who's actually in his masculinity, as opposed to a lot of men nowadays. And it's not about sexuality. Let's understand that, right? It's not about homosexual, heterosexual. That's not the question. I'm talking about energies. I'm talking about archetypes here. I think it's a beautiful thing to see a man who's fully in his masculinity, because it means also there's a space for his partner, for his woman to rest in that. It's that container, that image that once I was shared, once I was given, is like the man is that bowl, and the woman is the water, right? Or again, right, depending on how it works at home with the partners. But how many women today have become masculine women because the men are not men enough?
Yeah.
And I'm saying that from a place of compassion and realizing that the men were not men enough. It's because then there is no more spaces for them to express their masculinity.
Yeah.
To feel into that. They've been told that if you strong and powerful, and or if you express anger, you're hurtful. Well, no. I mean, we need a place to express our anger. Why do you think we do boxing oftentimes in our retreats? Why do you think we punch each other? A little bit fight club style, with love and with gloves and with headgear and everything you want. And that's the most challenging and the most transformational activity, is because some guys I've seen some guys just transform from the moment they put the gloves on. And there's so much fear, and like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And then you give him permission to actually let loose in a safe, loving space with a brother who agrees to dance with them. And you see them rise and become more confident, powerful.
Yeah.
And they take that home to be like, honey, I'm here, and let me show up for our family. You see what I'm saying?
I started boxing like 6 months ago, and yeah, I feel that, and I like it.
Physical activity, combat.
Yeah, expressing that anger. Yeah, expressing that anger helps a lot. Even shouting in a room or something like that, it helps.
Yeah.
Otherwise, those energies are stuck in you and is killing you. That's the.
Pierre, do you think it's something with the women in regards to the new generation now, where women take on larger roles at the office? They're no more like in the 1950s where they stay in the kitchen. Do you think that's where this takeover of a woman saying, I got to be more masculine, and the men are getting confused, where it's like, wait a minute, you're supposed to be the lesser of me, and now you're trying to be stronger. And I think men kind of get confused in that dynamic.
Yeah, I think there can be some of that. I do think that polarity is universal and important. Good and bad, male and female, black and white, yin and yang. There's always that energy, and so I do think seeing more and more men today who were not masculine anymore. And that's okay. That's whatever you want to be, you can be whatever you want. But I see it as really indeed that sense of like, where right now men and women are the same, right? And so women are not really feminine, men are not really, and not men, and men are not really masculine anymore. It's somewhere in between. And it's a weird dance. And I'd like to argue, at least from what I see, that there's an increasingly, more and more people are challenging that narrative and saying, let's work as a team. let me tap into my masculine energy so I can allow you to tap into your feminine energy. And case in point, that's interesting. I saw a friend of mine a couple of months ago who just got in a relationship, and I saw her and I was like, there's something, you look different. And I told her, I was like, you look way more feminine. Before she can be pretty ghetto and badass, and she's, and quite masculine in her energy. She's a beautiful woman, but quite masculine in her energy.
Yeah.
When I saw her with her man and their beautiful couple, I saw her resting in her femininity. I told her, I was like, you look very like beautiful, and there was so much more flow. There was so much less like confrontation and anger like stuff. And she was like, yeah, because my man is my man. He's got me. I know I have my king, so I can take my place as a queen of that kingdom. And that's a beautiful thing, I think, to be able to give each other that gift of tapping into our respective essence. It's not a must. Whoever, people do whatever they want. But I'm saying it's a beautiful thing here when you find that complementarity and you allow that complementarity, and specifically for the men listening to us. And I would say the men may wonder, but I know the women will agree. Oftentimes the women will become more masculine because the men are not masculine enough. At least that's a lot of the people I meet.
My sister-in-law is staying with us for a while, and she's always trying to convince me that, happy spouse, happy house. And I said, no. I said, we're 50-50 here. I said, she's not running things. We're running things half and half. She's in the old school mentality where I have to always please my wife. She says, yes, dear. Yes, dear. It doesn't work that way. My wife gets upset with things that I do wrong, and I get upset with her, and she gets worried when I get upset. I feel like that's a good balance. I'm not going to say perfect balance, but I feel like that's a good balance of, we know each other's line. And I feel like across the board, everything in life is balanced, no matter what you do. So if the woman is trying to get too much, that is going to confuse the man. And then he starts to lose his way. And that dynamic is just, it's lopsided,
I think it is. And having said that, I do whatever I can so that, again, so as the provider and protector of that kingdom of my family, I have roles and responsibility I have to fulfill. And having said that, I agree that happy wife, happy life, I think, creates a lot of problems because many men forget themselves in the process.
Yeah.
I speak from personal experience, trying to do things that I thought or I assumed that my wife wanted me to do. A silly example, I remember one day I was like, oh, I'm gonna clean up, before she comes back, I'm gonna finish the dishes, I'm gonna do this and do that. And I was doing that to please her. She came home, she didn't say nothing. And at some point I threw it in her, like, I was getting resentful because I didn't get the acknowledgement that I was expecting. And she was like, I didn't ask you nothing. That's not what I needed you to do.
Yeah.
She wanted me to do something else, but because I was projecting my expectations on her, and then obviously she didn't know. We didn't have that conversation. It was all in my head.
Yeah.
So that creates problem because then I would grow resentful and be like, I'm doing all this for you, and and she was like, well, fuck the dishes, just do something else. Ask me what I need, or just stop asking and do things, that are more in line with what you need to do here. And so I'm just saying to the guys out there, yes, do please your women and your partner. Again, forgive me for being heterocentric here, but at the same time, remember, I became a much better husband when I stopped sacrificing myself, when I started to create more space for me to actually be happy. When I started to go to some of these weekends and spending, and sometimes my wife was like, hey, let's go visit my family. I was like, hey, we were there last weekend, so you go, I stay, because I have to establish some healthy boundaries, and I need my time. And the reason why I was not asking for my own time is because I had all these weird beliefs that I have to be there all the time. I have to show them that I love them. But I have some needs too.
Yeah.
So for me to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to go tonight, I'm coming back tomorrow. Sometimes I would come back so much more patient, loving, attuned, responsive, right? I was showing up rejuvenated, regenerated, like ready to show up, more fully. And without, and again, so I feel like that's also important for people to have their own space, their own circles. I don't do everything with my wife. She doesn't do everything with me.
No.
Thank God, because otherwise,
Yeah.
we would drive each other crazy.
You got to let each other miss each other, right?
Exactly. Amen.
Yeah. There's a great book about this. It's called The Way of the Superior Man from David Deida.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know that. It's a great book
Yeah, yeah.
about polarities and this kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't think everybody has to agree with it, but I feel like it can be a healthy way for many men to again reclaim their purpose, find themselves, and ideally do that in a space, where where you will be guided by men who are a few steps ahead of you in that journey,
Awesome. So how is it living in Cairo?
It's a blessing and a curse. It's a beautiful thing. You're in New York, right, Joey?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Cairo is just like New York, but not as clean and not as quiet. And that's a joke, right? I mean that it's even dirtier, and it's even noisier. But it's a beautiful place. It's a magical place. It's a blessed place right now. We're with everything that's going on in the world, this is pretty heavy. But having said that, it's a beautiful thing. Living in traditional societies is different from living in the U.S. I used to live in the U.S. for almost a decade, and I left the U.S. because again I had I disagreed with some of the values and things like that that were going on. And I also needed my kids to have a life. So during COVID, I left the US. But it's a beautiful place with beautiful people. And if you guys haven't been, have you been to Egypt? Either of you?
Not yet. Not yet. Actually, my friend is there right now.
Bucket
on a
list.
holiday,
Yeah.
and he's liking it.
Of course, it's a magical place. Yeah. I'm about 40 minutes away from the pyramids. There's just everything, and also men all over the place, including in Egypt, or doing the work, and this work, just to kind of link Egypt and everything. We the last retreats we had in the group, in the team that I led, I co-led with a couple of other brothers. We were about 30 men, 25 men. We had about 14 nationalities.
Wow.
And I want to say that just as a reminder that whether you're sitting in New York, in Romania, in Egypt, in Turkey, in Peru, in LA, doesn't matter. This is a global movement of men saying, it's time, let me elevate, and it depends if how tapped you're into the science and the cosmos and stuff. But, some would say that there's definitely some shifts happening here. And a lot of the guys from all over the world are basically saying, okay, let me kind of, elevate my consciousness, which means, heal these old wounds, these old traumas, because I deserve it, and because my loved ones deserve it, and because we all gonna be better off, for that, after that.
I hope the women on our page get motivated to get the men into your retreat.
Yeah. give them that gentle nudge, or that
Yeah.
Big
Honey,
kick
watch
in the
this
butt.
podcast.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Do you have anything coming up here that you want to mention to our viewers?
Well, I mean, we talk of healing. And so there's two things. Number one, I'd like to invite, the men who are seeking a space to look for a local men's circle, or or to contact me and or to check out the Sacred Sons. Do the work. Nobody can do it for you, and you don't have to wait for that divorce. You don't have to wait for that loss. You don't just do the work already. That's number one. Number two, I also want to mention that it takes skills also to hold space for people. And I see a lot of people, a lot of healers coming up and opening doors for people to process. And I do want to invite also the people who are becoming practitioners or healers or doing work to build their capacity. I'm personally offering some mentorship program where people really get to learn about the nervous system and somatic tools and breath work and how to really be better equipped. Because if you want to dive deeper into that conversation, if you want to hold a deeper space for your wife, for your partner, for your kids, for yourself, for the people around you, if you want to hold circles, if you want to be with your boys and go a little bit beyond that superficial conversation, and you want to actually ask, like, what's going on, just like I'm doing, for example, with a few friends of mine. We started, I think it's been maybe 4 or 5 years. Every Sunday we have a Zoom call. I have another 5 brothers. For the past 4 or 5 years,
Wow.
every Sunday we have 1 hour. We drop in. What's going on with you? How do you feel? And we're not here to discuss politics. We're not here to give each other lessons and tell each other what to do. We're here to just say, hey, how you doing, man? What's going on with you? And so to find that space is important. At the same time, I just want to remind people here that to build your capacity, if you're a space holder, if you're a therapist, if you're a practitioner, if you organize circles and so on and so forth, please remember that things get real in these spaces. It's great to tell people, go for it, feel what you need to feel. But that also means you have a responsibility to hold the safety of that space. And sometimes I've seen some funky stuff out there. So invitation to all the space holders here who want to learn more, look me up, let's talk, let's have a conversation. One of my passion is really to build capacity. I've been doing that for the past 20 years. So for anybody who want to build a capacity and their ability to process healing, trauma healing, hit me up.
How can the viewers find you, Pierre?
They can find me on, just like my name here down there is Pierre Etienne Vannier. My website is P.E. Vannier. So my initials, P like Paris, E like Egypt, Vannier, VANNIER.com. And they can also find me on IG at P.E. Vannier, where I post my classes, my workshops, and everything, and some upcoming retreats coming up. So yeah, if anybody feels inspired,
Yeah, awesome.
the door is always open.
Awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.